Welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. Today, we're going to be looking ahead to the issues lawmakers are taking away from the midterm elections with Ben Dworkin. He's the director of the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship at Rowan University. Up first, though, transitioning to clean energy. What's that going to look like here in New Jersey? Regina Egea of Garden State Initiative is standing by, so let's get to it. Joining me now is Regina Egea. She is the former chief of staff for Governor Chris Christie and is currently president of Garden State Initiative, a think tank. Regina, it's good to see you here.
Thanks for having me, Laura.
Well, let's talk first a little bit about what Garden State Initiative is, what it is that you all do.
Sure. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank, as you said, and we focus primarily on fiscal and economic matters here in the state. We do a variety of things to help the public as well as policymakers make sense of all the economic data that we have. So we do some research, both long and short form research. We do forums to bring people together to discuss the issues of the day on, say, fiscal and economic matters. And then lastly, we try to communicate both through our own mediums, podcasts, et cetera, and come on shows like yours, Laura, and try to help decipher and help the public understand what's going on in our state.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of buzzwords that you hear out there about protecting the environment, clean energy, and sometimes people, they hear it, but they don't really understand what it all means. So let's talk a little bit about clean energy and what does that really mean? What are people maybe misunderstanding, or maybe what's getting caught up in the political fight of it all?
Wow, that was a big question that you just asked. So I'll try to break it down a little bit.
Sure.
So clean energy, right, about eliminating emissions in our environment. And the two largest contributors, actually the largest contributor to the bad emissions are transportation. So buses, cars, et cetera. And as you know, we have a big network of roads in our state, so we tend to have more of our emissions coming from cars, but also in power generation. And it's important, I think, for everyone to understand that for our utilities that light and heat our home, that we have actually very low emission sources of power in New Jersey. In fact, almost half of the power that's generated to light and heat our homes is from natural gas, and the other half is from nuclear energy, and less than 7% or so are from the renewables. And so, number one, understanding the sources, and both gas and nuclear are low emission. But we all agree that we want to move to more renewable sources, of course. So whether that be solar or wind or other innovations that will come along. And I think it's important that we have a frank conversation about how much will that cost as we move to those renewable sources.
Well, talking about solar and wind, particularly wind, recently I think you tweeted something and it was discussing the proposed wind farm, those turbines slated to be off the coast of Long Beach Island. People don't necessarily like it, or maybe they do like it. There are certain aspects they don't. Can you talk a little bit about the key issues with that proposal and perhaps the backlash or how you intend to address it?
Sure. Yeah, and I think it's important. I don't think there's any disagreement that we support, and others, frankly, along the shoreline support the use of renewable sources, including wind turbines. The discussion is really about the placement of those and how it would impact the tourism industry, frankly, in our state, as well as the general enjoyment of the public. So right now, the current plan really calls for these very large, so they're almost 1,000 feet from the sea level. So think 3 football fields, right, that you have high, and they're only from 9 to 20 miles offshore. Now that would be the closest that any wind farm has been deployed around the world, quite frankly. And I think the questioning that's going on now is really, why can't they be placed? There are federal waters off our coast that could be placed more like 30 to 50 miles off our coast, which would, we think, be the advocates, I think would be a much better placement, both visually as well as from an environmental perspective. And interestingly enough, and I think this is just coming to light, that actually those waters, those federal waters that are further off, are being used for transmission lines for New York, not for New Jersey.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so, yeah, that's very interesting, right? The question's been raised now. So why is it that those waters off New Jersey aren't being used for New Jersey before they're being used for New York? And I think that fortunately caused, I think, the recent ruling to not allow that transmission to go through right now, and more examination. How can we better use those waters from New Jersey? So I think, there's a desire to want to all get on the same page and really try to accommodate both the needs of those in the shore area, as well as overall in the state who want to move renewables forward.
So I make sure that I understand this. People in New Jersey, they're concerned. They don't want an eyesore. They don't want it to affect tourism, and they don't want it to hurt the environment. And so now you're saying that there actually already is something in place, and it's benefiting New York. How do people not know about this? And I think that what we were talking about before we just came on air is about letting people know, transparency.
Exactly. Transparency in this case, why would there be a priority for New York off the New Jersey shoreline and federal waters, but also the cost. So that's been really, frankly, the Garden State Initiative has spent a lot of time trying to understand as we make this transition. There are two goals that have been stated. One is to move to half of our power by the end of 2030 being generated by renewables. And I remind you, right, as I said, for less than 10% is now generated by renewables. And so the question of how can that really be accomplished and at what cost to all of the ratepayers in our state? And I think there's been no transparency on that. And that has been one before we make any more commitments, whether it's to wind farms, to more solar farms, or to whatever, nuclear subsidies, quite frankly, we ought to get some more understanding of how our cost to light and heat our homes this coming winter, as well as the subsequent several winters, is going to be.
Right. Well, as far as the amount of energy that the proposed wind farm would generate, you're saying that we need to be by 30%, 30% by 2030. So how would that wind farm off Long Beach Island, how would that fit into the state government's clean energy proposals?
It's a component. So it's 50% of the state power by 2030. So by this decade, end of this decade, 7 years from now, this expectation, half the power. And that's an enormous financial investment. And there have been commitments being contracted with various construction for these wind farms, as well as additional solar subsidies. But right now, you can't square the numbers. Right, you can't square the numbers that much money is going to be, and it will actually produce the amount of power to hit that goal.
Yeah. I was curious if we could talk a little bit about a controversy over a new rule that mandates the electric boilers in commercial properties, schools, government buildings. In essence, it's phasing out gas, and that's supposed to take effect at the start of next year. A lot of people, Fuel Merchants Association was concerned about the cost of not only constructing that, but what the cost would actually be. So can you talk a little bit about the impacts of phasing out the gas and bringing on the electric boilers?
Sure. Well, so at a couple levels. So one, as you mentioned, the cost. So we'll just cite a couple numbers that, right now, what's been said in public for New Jersey, it only costs about $7,000 to retrofit your heating system for electric versus gas. The actual experience in Massachusetts, who are a little bit ahead of us, is more like $23,000 per household. So the numbers are dramatically different from what the stated plan is versus the reality of the experience in another state. But more importantly, I think it's a quality of life for both residents as well as businesses. And two great examples, like if we're in our households, right? Most of us don't remember when there were electric dryers for our clothes versus gas heated, which is what most of us have in our homes, because it's much more, kind to our clothes, and it doesn't cause the wear and tear that electric will. So this is talking about quality of life, not only with the dryers for your clothes, but also in your home, right? And both your home and commercial kitchens. Using gas is really the standard for anybody cooking on a stovetop and for most restaurants. And I think the food industry is also very concerned about being able to have the equipment that they need to really produce meals for the quality that they want to deliver to the public. So I think it's both a financial issue that's not been well examined nor made terribly public, but also quality of life. why would everyone want to go back, frankly, to the downside of all electric appliances in our homes as well as in businesses?
And especially with the holidays upon us, and then after that, the cold winter season, people love that comfort food. They love cooking over that gas range. People that when they build houses, when I did, you got to have the gas range because it gives you a little bit, even if you're not a really great cook. I'm not a good cook, but right, I want my cornbread cooked on the gas on the cast iron skillet because it gives it a certain sizzle that you can't get with an electric stovetop.
Yeah, and you control it much more precisely, actually. It's so anyway, it's, as I say, it's a quality of life. And frankly, the relative, as I said at the very beginning though, Laura, most of the bad emission comes from cars and transportation and buses. It's really not because of how we light and heat our homes.
Right, right. So some final thoughts here. Do you think that the state is perhaps focusing on some of the wrong places to be able to really make, to affect change?
Well, I think they put the cart before the horse. They've set a goal, and without regard to, I think, the implications for both the quality of life in our state as well as the cost of living in our state. So I think that I would go back and revisit that. What is it that we think is a reasonable cost of transition and compromise for the transition to the renewables, then set the goal and pursue it. So I think it's just been done a little bit backwards. And I think more collaboration on that with a broader set of individuals participating in how those goals should be set would be a really much better received by the state.
Yeah. Now, I know that you are involved in any number of issues. If people want to find out a little bit more about what it is that you're doing, what issues that you're looking into, where can they find out more?
Sure. On the website is gardenstateinitiative.org, but we're also on Twitter as well as Facebook, and welcome any sort of both questions as well as commentary on our work, because we do, as you say, address a whole variety of tax policy as well as energy and really the whole quality of life and cost of living in New Jersey.
Yeah. Cost of living, it is always such an issue, and we're losing a lot of people moving out to other states because it just isn't affordable.
Right, and property taxes in particular. In fact, Laura, I'd love to come back and talk, next year, because I believe that there's going to be incredible pressure on property taxes, which are already the highest in the nation, because of the escalating both health benefits and pension costs that have already been announced that the mayors and county commissioners now are trying to deal with in their budgets.
All right. Well, we'll make that a plan, and we'll consider it booked to talk about taxes next year. Regina, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Laura, for having me.
With me now is Ben Dworkin. He's the director of the Rowan Institute for Public Policy and Citizenship at Rowan University. It's good to see you.
Good to be here with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, let's just get your takeaways from the midterm election. Everybody's talking and still looking and poring over what does it mean, what happened. So what's your take?
Well, look, there's a lot. I think what we know today is that it was surprising. The fact is, most people looking at this election really thought that the fundamental dynamics of national politics, you had high inflation at 8%, you had an unpopular president, you had a historical record that said the first midterm of a president, especially one that's unpopular with a bad economy, is going to be really good for the party that's not in the White House. We expected this to be a pretty solid year for the Republicans. And the fact that they didn't meet those expectations was surprising. Now, they'll maybe be one seat behind or tied in the Senate. Their Republicans are likely to take control of the House. So it's still a good year, but it's just not nearly as good as what we expected, say, 10 days ago.
Right. Ultimately, it is about who has control, and they don't care if it's a one person or 100 people.
Mhm.
Although that does make a bit of difference when it comes to having a supermajority and such. But what is this? What is this saying about the messages and how other races may be run? And looking even into New Jersey, 2023, the legislature is up. Are there messages and lessons that people are going to take with them and keep in mind as they are moving through the legislative year and congressional year
I think
session?
right. I mean, look, I'm not sure we really know exactly at this point what the lessons to be learned from the messages. Republicans clearly were very focused on the issues of inflation and the high cost of living these days and crime. Democrats were very clearly focused on abortion, and then a little bit of inflation, and then a little bit of democracy, and we're sort of all over the map. What's really interesting, and I admit that I am part of, at least this is part of my world, in terms of the people who try to understand these things even before they happen. There are any number of pundits and prognosticators who went out a week before talking about how the Democrats had no message discipline. They were all over the map. And then after the Democrats did much better than expected, the same people were on TV and in the paper talking about the fact that Democrats talked about all the issues. That's what helped propel them to victory. So it's a little bit, until we really see data and understand what this means, why it means these things, we won't really know. We know that there are going to be, in the coming year, you're going to be talking about affordability in New Jersey as we head into these legislative elections. Democrats are very focused on it. Certainly the Republicans will remain very focused on it. And we have to recognize that there is a map. These districts get cut. The Democrats are very confident that they'll be able to maintain their majorities in both the state assembly and the state senate, given the way things are. And we should understand, New Jersey is not a place where there are an equal number of Democrats and Republicans. There's 50% more, 1 million more registered Democrats and registered Republicans in the state. 20 years ago, that number was under 300,000.
So and then there's so many unaffiliated independent voters as well.
And true, but what's interesting is that today, and only in the last couple of years, registered Democrats now outnumber the unaffiliated voters. That hasn't happened. We had never seen that before. Both parties nationally, and I think this is somewhat true in New Jersey, have really calcified. You have people who retreat to their corners depending on who's got an R and who's got a D next to their name. And I think that's affecting even the unaffiliated. In other words, we don't see as many swing voters as we used to see.
Yeah. Do you think that they're fed up with the partisans, or they feel like that they want to be, or is that partisan divide driving people? Because I would think there would be more independents.
One might think that, and people sometimes like to think of themselves as independents, but 85% of the time they're voting for one party or the other. I mean, the people who really can swing back and forth are in elections are just becoming a smaller and smaller part of the electorate. There are any number of reasons why we retreat to our different silos, and we could talk about social media and media in general, the kind of discourse within politics. But I think what we have seen is that a lot of people, if you are a Democrat, you think that the world that the Republicans are creating is not a world you want to live in. And if you're a Republican, you think the world that the Democrats stand for and that they're trying to build is not a world you want to be in. So even if you don't like your candidate or you're a little uncomfortable with an issue here or there are fundamental forces that basically keep a great number of voters in each side. And in a state like New Jersey, where there are just a lot more Democrats than Republicans, that kind of dynamic is going to favor the Democrats.
Yeah. Well, and a lot when you talk to people, and even myself, when I talk to people, when it's not on the record, sometimes they say, "All right, well, I might affiliate with this party, and I might have voted for this person, but that's not who I really like. I just don't like the other side."
Mm. It is a unifying principle, not principle,
Yeah.
but I mean, it's a unifying factor for
Right.
both sides
It's like
that they don't
sports
like the
teams.
other side more than anything.
Right. Yeah, it's rivalries, and really the political party, the Republicans, Democrats, they become these political rivals to like on steroids, and it's become so vicious, and so angry. And do you think part of the message of the midterms is because some of the analysts are saying this, and again, is it because that they're trying to manage expectations, or is it because they're trying to spin something that went their way or that surprised them? But they're saying things, and what do the voters make of it?
Every election is going to have its own dynamics. It's going to have its own sort of what's the rhythm, what's the feel, what's the zeitgeist, what's the spirit of the moment. And 2020 is different than 2022, and it'll be different than 2023. So we shouldn't interpret too much from this election to understand what's going to happen in the legislative races ahead. A week is a lifetime in politics. There are a lot of weeks to go, and a lot of things can happen in the economy, in our politics, and so we'll have to sort of see what the contours of the race will be. But clearly, uh, as a national trend, we are seeing significant hyperpartisanship, tribalism, even between folks in each party. Now, that's when you count all the votes nationally. Obviously, in some states, they're very Republican. And so that kind of retreat to the corner makes it harder for that moderate Democrat to win over Republican votes. And it makes it harder in certainly in statewide races in New Jersey for say a Republican who might be outnumbered in terms of when you look at the voter rolls, but for that Republican to be able to win over Democratic votes. We know it can happen. Chris Christie made it happen twice. Jack Ciattarelli came within 3% of being able to win. So these things can be competitive. But right now, when people retreat to their corners, the numbers favor the Democrats, certainly here in New Jersey.
Yeah, so as we head into 2023 and the legislature is up for reelection, what issues do you think, is it going to be more of that tribal politics, or is it going to be about issues? And if so, what issues do you think candidates will be talking about and representatives will be talking about?
I think affordability is going to be the dominant issue. It's going to be who can make this state affordable. Democrats, because they have such strong control over both houses of the legislature, will pursue their agenda and will be able to say, look at all the things we made cheaper. And that's how we made New Jersey more affordable. Republicans will criticize them for any number of reasons, both in terms of the substance, how they did it, and whether it was significant enough. And they'll offer their own plan for what they want to do to make New Jersey more affordable. I think that's going to be the dominant issue here. New Jersey is a state that is now codified Roe v. Wade and has made it part of the law. It's not nearly the kind of controversial issue we saw, say, in Kansas and in Kentucky and other places. So that's not, those kind of social issues will not be there. If there's going to be a social issue, it will be likely revolving around sex education and schools. This is something that's been percolating. There's a tremendous amount of both information and misinformation going out there on this issue, but it could emerge certainly as something that will be an issue front and center a year from now as voters go to the polls.
Yeah, I mean, and parents, they get very passionate, and they get, you're dealing with their child, and that can get really ugly as well. Do you think that, and you also mentioned how New Jersey's safe with Roe versus Wade, but I've heard people in the legislature talking about maybe we'll just put it into our Constitution. So let me just pose that question. Do you think that that is likely to happen in the upcoming 2023 election, or will they be talking about that in this upcoming election?
I'm not sure it's going to be the front and center issue. I think, New Jerseyans and certainly the Democratic controlled legislature is not we're talking about gradations of protection here in terms of whether it's just by statute or whether it's in the Constitution or simply interpreted in the Constitution, as the New Jersey State Supreme Court has done. I mean, that's a real inside baseball argument. I'm just not sure that's going to really be front and center for the voters here who are heading to the polls in an off-year election. It's going to be the 6th year of the Murphy administration. We'll see how they're doing and whether people are tired and want some kind of change. So we'll have to look up. But right now, clearly, the issue is going to be affordability and potentially education.
All right. Well, Ben Dworkin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's always good to see you and hear from you as well.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the invite.
And that will do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.